All right, today we're going to be in Exodus chapter 16. Exodus chapter 16, verses 1 through 21. As we continue our series in the wilderness, Exodus 16, 1 through 21 is a story of a father who took his young son out onto the back porch, the back deck, and he took him and he put him up and stood him up on the railing of the deck. Got him good and steady, then went down to the ground. Said, "Son, I want you to jump. Trust me, I'll catch you." The boy was real hesitant. "I don't know about this." He's real scared because he's real small, real frightened, and 4 or 5 years old maybe. And Dad finally just coaxed him and coaxed him and coaxed him. And finally the boy said, "Okay, I'll do it." And so he jumps. And about that time the father steps back and lets him fall flat on the ground. Picks him up, dusts him off, wipes his tears, says, "Let that be a lesson to you, son. Don't ever trust anybody." Now, before I get in my actual message, that's a clear violation. You're supposed to, your child should see in their father God, who can be trusted at all times. You don't ever do that to your kid. That's a terrible thing. But what it points out is that Jesus actually lived by that same motto, don't trust anyone. In John 2, verse 24, we find people were starting to believe in Jesus and trust Him in, and it says this, "But Jesus, on His part, was not entrusting Himself to them, for He knew all men." You see, when it comes to God, trust is not a two-way street, nor should it be. Because of our sin, God doesn't trust us. I mean, it's hard enough for us to trust each other, but He knows what's in our heart. He knows every motivation of our heart. How could He even possibly trust us? He's a holy and sinless God, though, and so we can trust Him. While He can look at us and He can see sin and He can find fault all day long and reason not to trust us, we cannot look at Him and find anything in His character or nature that says, "I can't trust you, God." Oh yeah, we can look at our circumstances and He doesn't do what we want when we want and what we think He ought to do, and we can try to play God and make Him do what we want Him to do and say, "I'm not going to trust you unless you do this, 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 and this." We can try that. But it still doesn't change His character. It still doesn't change who He is, and doesn't change that He's perfect in all His ways. See, our problem is the same sin that keeps Him from trusting us, that's in us, the same sin in us, also works to keep us from trusting Him. Even though we can trust Him, we tend not to trust Him because of our own sin nature. Thankfully, Jesus, the holy sinless sacrifice for our forgiveness, as we just sang about, made a way that we can trust God enough to be saved, so that then we can be brought under His grace for the rest. When we fail to trust Him, when we stumble to trust Him, we can walk in His grace. Trust is something learned, right? I don't trust someone I just met. Neither should you. We learn to trust people. They have to prove they're trustworthy. And we learn that by watching them. And we wouldn't say that we do that, but by testing them. To see if they're trustworthy or not. We've had this new temp at work, and we're kind of doing that with him. We kind of give him a little bit of rope, and we just see what he does with it, We give him a little space to see, will he be a self-starter? Will he see what needs to be done and do it without being told? Can we trust him in this job to learn and really grow and to take some initiative? But we don't necessarily do that with everybody we meet, but yet in ways we do. We just watch them. We watch the circumstances they're going through. We'll watch what's going on with them and see if they are trustworthy or not. In our series, we have left Egypt, the wilderness of sin and separation from God, where we were before we accepted Christ. That's our Egypt. That's the wilderness of sin. Remember we said it was the wilderness before the wilderness, where we were living without God. We were lost. We were wandering. We were idolatrous. We were choosing all kinds of other things to worship. And that's where we were before we accepted Christ. And once we accepted Christ, did we go straight to the promised land? No. God immediately takes them into this other wilderness, and we're calling that the wilderness of faith. It's where God grew the Israelites. It's where God is growing us right now, so that we learn to trust Him more. He works on us. He changes us, grows our faith, makes us more like Jesus. Last week we discovered that the first thing God wants to do with us in the wilderness of faith, after we've accepted Christ as Lord and Savior, is to teach us to leave the bitter things of our life behind. Our sin, our hurts, our failures, our broken relationships. And what He wants to do is He wants to transform those bitter things into something sweet. To use those things in our life to teach us and to become a part of our testimony in order to teach others about Himself. That's what God did with the Israelites at Marah, where He turned the bitter water into better water. Turned what was useless into something useful. Turned death into life. Once we start growing in this wilderness of faith and start learning to leave the past behind and use it for the glory of God, like the Israelites, we have to learn to trust God in order to move forward in our faith. We've got to let go of the baggage from our past. But then in order to keep taking steps closer and closer to the promised land and becoming more and more what He wants us to be, we have to learn to trust Him. Trust what He wants to do with us, what He can do with us. Trust His nature. Trust His character. And so we pick up with Exodus 16, 1 through 21, as God teaches us to trust Him while we are in the wilderness. How does He do that? Well, He takes the normal problems of life. He reveals His plan for solving those problems, which He has done a lot in His Word. He say, well, I got specific problems in my life, and I can't find that specific problem in the Bible. I'm going to tell you something. There's no problem in your life, okay? Not one issue in your life that's not spoken toward in the Bible. All the specifics is what we see. But the heart of the issues, the foundational issues that we have, how we handle those problems are all spoken of in Scripture. All right? And so He's got a plan. And then He wants to challenge us to trust His plan, all the while offering proof that He can be trusted. Proof in His Word. Proof in previous circumstances where He has proven faithful to us. So let's rejoin the Israelites in progress, so to speak, as they continue their journey in the wilderness of faith. What I'm going to do today is 21 verses. I'm not going to read them all at one time. I'm going to do it point by point today. And first we will discover the problem in this passage. Verses 1 through 3. Then they set out from Elim. Well, let's just stop right there. Good Bible study, okay? If we're picking up there, and we weren't here last week, what's Elim? We'll go back to verse 27. Elim was the place where they came, and there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there beside the waters. Remember, before that, they didn't have any water, and they were impatient, and they made God turn that bitter water into sweet water when just 7 miles further down the way was an oasis God already had planned for them. Now they're at Elim. And how hard do you think it had to be for them to leave Elim? Think about that for a second. They had food, they had water. This was a good place to stay. I'm sure they wanted to linger there quite a while. Moses, we don't want to leave Elim if we're going out into more of what we just were in. Well, come on anyway. Come on anyway. And so they set out from Elim, verse 1. And all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. Now, I've been calling that Egypt. This is literally, the name of it is the wilderness of Sin. It's the place between the Exodus from Egypt and Mount Sinai, where God gives them the law. It's the wilderness where they are in sin. Literally, still in sin. Because they really don't know what sin is yet. Till they get to Sinai when God gives them the law. Okay? So they're in the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The sons of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Isn't that just like people? Isn't it just like people to look at slavery back in Egypt and forget all about it and say, man, there was lots of meat. Man, I tell you what, we had pots full of meat. I mean, we had bread to the full. Life was awesome in Egypt. They didn't think that when they were there. But we tend to glamorize things later when it's to our benefit, don't we? When things aren't going perfectly the way we want them to go, we'll do that. What was their problem? Let's talk about the problem. Their problem was what? Hunger. On the surface, their problem was hunger. They lacked food. And they say, we had it all back in Egypt. Yeah, we had to be slaves to get it, but we had it there, you know. Needing food was their surface problem. We all have those. They're external surface problems. We have those things we need, sickness, poverty, maybe even loneliness. That could be a problem of the heart, but it could be a surface problem. Problems we see, problems we're aware of, problems others can see in our lives because they're obvious, external problems. Like the Israelites, we as Christians can get so focused on our surface problems that we miss the underlying spiritual problems we have that may be contributing to our surface problems. You with me? Say amen. Perhaps we're struggling financially. If you're struggling financially today, how are you doing in your giving to God? What kind of generosity do you feel you have? All right? Perhaps we're struggling, I mentioned loneliness. Now that's a very real thing. A lot of people have a lot of loneliness and a lot of people that live alone. My mom struggles with it, others struggle with it. It's a factor. It's a real factor in someone's life. But in some instances, especially with someone that's younger like myself. How'd you like that? You liked that, didn't you? You got to be somewhere in your own mind, right? Maybe loneliness is because you've got an anger problem and you just push people away. But you don't know that if all you're doing is looking at the surface problem. I'm lonely. Maybe it's something. It's not always something in the person's life, okay? I'm not saying that, but it can be, all right? No matter what our issue on the outside, they are often associated with an issue on the inside. The surface issue for the Israelites was the lack of food, but their real problem was that they lacked the knowledge of God they needed in order to daily trust Him to provide it. They had all grown up from birth in a culture that was polytheistic, with many gods. They had never understood how to be completely at peace. You see, when you have many gods, there's no way to keep them all happy. A life with a polytheistic culture, listen to what I'm saying here, where there was many gods in that time, you always were afraid that you'd made one of them mad. And when something didn't go right in your life, which was how often? Pretty much all the time, right? Something's always messed up. Then which God is upset with me? That's how they were living back in Egypt. That's what their culture was like back in Egypt. What God's mad today? Aren't you glad there's only one God and you can say He always loves me no matter what? Praise God. He's not mad at you. He loves you. Yeah, when we mess up, He gets disappointed, and what He does is He patiently, like a loving father who doesn't step back from His child, He catches us and He dusts us off and He sets us back down on the ground and says, now do it my way. Come back to my way. They could never have peace. I'm not sure these Israelites understood what peace even was. I mean, they'd been in slavery in Egypt. The Israelites didn't really know Yahweh, Jehovah God, as the only God. They lacked a knowledge of Him, and it kept them from knowing He had a plan and could be trusted. They should have learned that lesson when they got to Elim and found the oasis and said, wow, if we'd have just trusted God. And maybe they did for a short while, but it didn't take long after they left Elim to go, where's another Elim, God? Where's another Elim? We need another Elim from you. And to get frustrated and start grumbling. You know, I wished everything always went all right. I wished I could make everything all right in all your lives sitting here this morning. Anybody listening, I wish I could just make your life all right. I could just snap my finger and do that. And I know God can, but you know why He doesn't? Because He loves us enough to let us have free will to make choices in life. And choices in life have consequences. And when we don't make choices to follow Him, bad things come. That's just the truth. It's the world we live in. But that doesn't change the fact that He can be trusted. So why don't we learn the lesson today, right now? It's simple. If you're having problems trusting God, then you're probably like the Israelites. It's because you haven't really taken the time to get to know Him. They don't trust Him because they don't really know Him. To trust God, we have to literally take Him at His word. All we need to know about Him in order to trust Him is found in the Bible. Really is. It's proven to be accurate, true over and over again. Jesus alone, listen to this, fulfilled hundreds of testimonies concerning the Messiah written over the span of more than 1,500 years by all these different authors. The odds of that many prophecies being fulfilled in one man are astronomically low. In fact, it's almost impossible. But He did it. Which proves the truth of the Bible, a Bible which points to God, which gives us knowledge so we can trust Him. You'll struggle to trust God when you fail to spend time in His Word. And what we'll do is we'll constantly return back to that which we trust the most instead. And who's that? Ourselves. Our own reasoning, our own rationality, and what we have come to understand about life on our own. And that lack of trust in God will lead to an unhealthy focus on external problems in our life and cause us to miss the internal problem of faith. If you could look at your week this past week and go, "Ben, I tell you what, I've been focused on this, that, and the other thing," and you were honest right now, you would probably have to admit you were focused on a lot of surface issues in your life. What God wants to do in your life is He wants you to get alone with Him and bring those surface issues to Him and say, "God, not why, but God, what are you trying to teach me? What are you trying to show me? How are you going to grow my faith through this?" Even the worst of circumstances. I mean, you might be battling cancer. God, what are you trying to teach me? How are you wanting to grow my faith through this? But we tend to focus on the surface issue. Go, "God, why? God, why?" Stop asking why and start asking what. What are you up to, God? What do you want to do? I mean, aren't we His? He can do with us what He wants, right? So what is it, God, that you want to do with me through all of this? So God's people had a problem. They had a trust problem. They lacked faith. But God had the plan. He had the plan. Now let's pick up at verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you." Man, God is good. "And the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether or not they will walk in my instructions. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily." So Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, "At evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord. For He hears your grumblings against the Lord. And what are we that you grumble against us?" Moses said, "This will happen when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and bread to the full in the morning. For the Lord hears your grumblings which you grumble against Him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, come near before the Lord, for He has heard your grumblings." It came about as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the sons of Israel that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "I have heard the grumblings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God." God's plan for teaching them to trust Him was threefold. 3 things He does here. The first was to provide. In verse 4, "I will rain bread from heaven for you." Is God raining bread from heaven for you? You better believe He is. You have what you need. You have Jesus. He's all you need. Again, it's the difference between looking at our surface problems and looking at our spiritual, deeper heart issues. He has solved the issue of your heart if you're in Christ today. He solved it. He gave His one and only Son who died on a cross for you, that you might be forgiven of the issues of your heart and cleansed. He's provided. What is God doing here with them? He is providing for them to get their attention, to get them to look to Him. Which is why you have then the material things and all the other blessings in your life, because God wants you to see Him in those things and glorify Him for those things. So the first thing is He provides for their surface need to get their attention. The second thing He does, and I said He's teaching them to trust Him, is to teach. You can't teach somebody something if you don't teach, right? There's got to be a lesson. And He says in verse 4, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. He wants to get them, and He wants to get us to learn to do what He says, no matter how strange it is. They thought there would be food readily available on their journey, probably. They thought everything was going to be all right once we get out of Egypt. We can plant, we can even harvest to eat. But in the wilderness of faith, God wanted to teach them that He alone could be depended on to provide for their basic needs, or any needs. That He could even make things appear out of thin air if He so wanted to. He wanted to teach them that He is a good God who wanted to bless them. All they had to do was obey His instructions concerning how to receive the blessing. You see, God wants to bless us. I really believe that. But I think sometimes we get off track and have no clue how to receive the blessing because we want to receive it in a certain way. We want a certain thing in a certain way, and God says, no, but I want to give you this in a way that's in accordance with my will and my word, and if you'll receive it my way, you'll be far more blessed than what you're chasing after. For us as Christians, the blessing is Jesus. We need no other provision. Once we have Him, we can trust God to meet our surface needs according to His riches and glory, the Bible tells us, in Christ Jesus. If we want, listen to this now, think about this. If we want more than He provides, isn't that an indication of a sinful heart? Isn't it? He should be all we need, and what He gives us should be sufficient to us. And when we reach that point, no matter how much or how little we can have what they were lacking. Peace. We can have peace. But only if we receive the blessing according to God's instruction, and that's by first receiving Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. So, His plan is to provide, His plan is to teach, but third, His plan is to reveal. His plan is to reveal, and He wants to reveal some very specific things to them. First, He wants to reveal His power to deliver. He'd already done that through Egypt and through the Red Sea, but He says in verse 6, at evening you will know that the Lord has brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now think about it this way. They saw the plagues. They should have known then. They saw the party of the Red Sea. They should have known then. But then they got to Marah, and God wasn't providing. So they cried and whined and complained. And God gives it to them. He proves Himself there. Then they get to Elim, and they realize, well, hey, God's provided. But they get out of Elim, and they haven't gone very far, and they start grumbling again. They still don't know that it was God who led them out of Egypt. It was God who led them through the Red Sea. It was God who turned those waters into sweet waters. It was God who put Elim in their path, and God still got a plan for them. And so He says He's going to do this. He's going to rain down from heaven for you, this bread from heaven for you, quail coming up in the evening, so that you will know that it's the Lord who has brought you out of the land of Egypt. He wants you to know Him. That's what salvation is, right? Gospel of John tells us salvation is that we might know Him, Jesus Christ, and the Father who sent Him. That's what it's all about. To know Him and to know Him more. Right? So he wants to reveal his power to deliver. Second, he wants to reveal his glory through provision. His glory through provision. First he says you will know. Then we get to verse 7. In the morning you will see the glory of the Lord. So you're going to know in your mind. You're going to see with your eyes. And then the third thing he wants to reveal is his attentiveness to their need. His attentiveness to their need. They're going to know. They're going to see. And then look what he says. For he hears your grumblings against the Lord. He wants them to know and to see that he hears so they can trust him. But then there's a fourth thing he wants to show them, and he does it in a very powerful way. He wants to reveal his authority through Moses. Throughout this wilderness journey, you're going to see God lift up Moses before them over and over and over again. Because they know, because like that story at the beginning of my message where the father stepped back and I said, well, that father shouldn't do that because it's the father's job to reveal God the Father. You should always be able to trust your dad. I know some people have father issues in here maybe and things like that, and I get that, but that's God's plan. All right? That's the way God designed it. All right? When my kids need to be able to trust me, I should prove trustworthy every single time. All right? And God proves trustworthy every single time. Well, Moses is like me. I'm my kids' father who helps them see the Heavenly Father. And so God props up Moses over and over and over again, exalts Moses before them over and over and over again so that they will trust Moses in order to learn to trust God. Okay? And so what does he do here? Well, he reveals this by giving Moses instructions directly. He tells him what he's going to do. He revealed his presence before Moses so they could see it. It said they looked toward the wilderness down in verse 10. And behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud, and the Lord spoke to Moses. God let them see him speaking to Moses. They looked and they saw it happening. So that they could trust the authority that God had placed upon Moses. And then he delivered a message to them through Moses. So that they would know this is the message. God spoke to Moses. Moses spoke to us. We need to obey God by obeying Moses. They were learning to revere the Lord and respect Moses. God was almighty, and he revealed that to them. God taught them in a manner that shows us all how we really come to know him, which is his goal. Look at the last part of verse 12. And you shall know that I am, he's the great I am the Lord your God. I'm not just God, but I'm Lord. I'm your master. I'm the one you should submit to. I'm the Almighty. We learn he's God when we see how he's provided for our surface needs. Yes. That leads us to him so we can learn from him. He then teaches us who he is and how much he loves us and wants to bless us and reveals his power, glory, attentiveness, and authority to us. It's a continual process that goes on the whole time we're in the wilderness of faith. Our faith grows the more we thank him for what he has done, spend time in his word, and worship him for who he is. Right now, you might only see your surface needs. How can you know that? Well, examine your prayer life. Do you have one, first of all? If you do, what are you talking about with God? Physical needs or spiritual needs? Yourself or others? Your desires or his desires? See, the sooner we accept that he has a plan, even in allowing us to have unmet needs, the sooner we accept that he is truly all we need. The sooner we'll grow to trust him as we go through the wilderness of faith. That's when we can move forward in life and become all he wants us to be and be ready to enter the promised land. And yes, we are ready to enter the promised land because of Jesus Christ. I get that. But 1 Thessalonians 4:3 says, this is the will of God, your sanctification. That's what the wilderness of faith is all about. It's the time when God sanctifies his children, making us more like Jesus and less like our old self before Christ. And we should want that sanctification. We should want that, to be willing to go through that process. Because God has a plan for it, and we must trust his plan. One way we can trust, let me get to my third point, is to discover the proof. We've seen the problem, we've seen the plan. Now let's look at the proof, verse 13. So, after he told them all this, it came about at evening that the quails came up and covered the camp. And in the morning, there was a layer of dew around the camp, just as God had said. When the layer of dew evaporated, behold, on the surface of the wilderness there was a fine, flake-like thing, fine as the frost of the ground. When the sons of Israel saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it every man as much as he should eat. You shall take an omer apiece according to the number of persons each of you has in his tent." The sons of Israel did so, and some gathered much and some little. When they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little had no lack. Every man gathered as much as he should eat. Moses said to them, "Let no man leave any of it until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. And some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. They gathered it morning by morning, every man as much as he should eat. But when the sun grew hot, it would melt. Remember, I've said this over and over again, the Israelites have been immersed in the pagan culture of Egypt. The generation God led out only knew of God through stories passed down. There was no Torah, no law, no Shema. And God was having to prove himself to them. All they had was an oral history. That's all they had, and that had been passed down for 430 years, so who knows what that sounded like anymore. They didn't really know God. Their lives were too busy with work back in Egypt, too scattered with various gods. They probably had a fast-paced work days where if they didn't work at a certain pace, they got beaten. They had idols in their lives. That's the way a pagan culture is. I mean, we should know we're in one. Doesn't that sound like us? Fast-paced, work, lots of idols. It's who we are as a nation. Being too busy, working all the time, idols of entertainment to fill our lives. And God becomes distant and impersonal. He becomes a part of our lives, but not the heart of our lives. So for the Israelites, God had to prove himself to be the only God worthy of their attention. He had to prove himself worthy of their trust so he could grow their faith and they could see how they needed him. And in these verses, he proves, first of all, his love and power. He proves his love and power. Listen, he is providing for an ungrateful group of people. Right? How many of you go do that? You might do it for a little while, but after a little while, you go walk the other way. You go say, enough's enough. I don't have to take this abuse. But not God. He doesn't give up on them. He provided them anyway. Why? Because he loved them and knew they needed his power at work in their lives. Listen, this was a contrast to the gods of Egypt. The gods of Egypt demanded of the people what they could not give. Constant obedience and loyalty and this, that, the other thing, or they'd get mad at them. That's the way they viewed it, okay? Those gods weren't real, we know that, but that's the way they viewed it. Jehovah God gave them what they did not have. The Egyptian gods demanded what they could not give. God gave them what they did not have. His provision proved his power to create what they needed and his love and power. Secondly, he proves his leadership ability. God displayed his ability to lead by giving specific instructions to Moses that when followed proved successful. They had quail at night. They had manna in the morning, just like God had said, just like Moses had conveyed to them. So they knew that God was the perfect leader. He knows everything, sees everything, is more powerful than anything. He's worth following because he met their surface need. Third thing he proves is their need to grow. Look at 19 through 21. Moses said to let no man leave any of it till morning. So what do? God's proven himself right. So they say, okay, we won't leave it until morning. No. They still don't listen. They don't listen. They leave it until morning. And what that proves is they still need to grow. God proves to them, you still need to grow. Don't ever think you need to stop growing. Remember that, church. Don't ever think you need to stop growing. Because you know what happens? The moment you think you don't need to grow anymore, you start taking for granted the things God has blessed you with and act like they're going to be there forever. And you know what happens? Your faith starts to become rotten and stinky and foul and no good. Always stay in the Word. Always stay before God, because you will not obey Him if you don't know His Word. And if you know His Word, sometimes you still won't obey Him because they didn't. God told them and they still didn't obey Him. But He is so patient. Amen? And by letting them fail, by letting them disobey, they learned that failure and disobedience bring about rottenness instead of fresh faith. They could see and smell the foul consequences of their failure. And thus He proved to them they needed to change and learn to obey. They need to grow up into Him. Ephesians 4:15 says we are to grow up in all aspects into Him who is the head, even Christ. That's what the wilderness of faith is about. It's the time between our Egypt of sin that we have left and the promised land that we're heading for. That's what we're supposed to be doing there, growing up into Him. And it cannot happen if we ignore His Word or completely just choose to constantly disobey it. But when we do, His grace is sufficient, His love is always faithful, and He is always patient with us because we are His children. We're not talking about perfection. We're just talking about becoming more on a regular basis. God, make me more. God, grow me more. God, make me strong. And it's not just a general thing. It's like, through this that I'm going through, teach me the lesson I need to learn. Then when we learn that, we get to that next difficult patch in our life. Teach me what I need to learn here, Lord. Or maybe He's reteaching that other lesson just to ingrain it in us more. But right now, somebody listening to this message is going through something and struggling to trust God. Some of you are here today and some are listening online. You know, that's why you really need to be at church. Because one of the ways God teaches us is through our fellowship with one another. And one of the ways God gets us through the difficulties of life is through the encouragement we can offer to one another. There might be something you're going through right now that somebody else in the church has already been through. But if you're not in fellowship with them, then they're not there. They cannot help you. But when you come and you make that issue known, then that person can come to you and say, I've been through something very similar. Can we sit down over a cup of coffee and talk about this? And I can walk with you through what God taught me through that. And I can help you learn through this. And I can help you grow through this. And I can help strengthen your faith. You see, God uses people to accomplish a lot of His purposes. That's why we need to be in the church. So if you've lost sight of God, I can assure you that He will bring someone your way to remind you and prove to you all over again that He is all you need. You just got to make yourself available to that person. Because believers point each other to God. You see, the church itself is proof that God loves us, leads us, and grows us. The wilderness of this world is our time of sanctification. That's what we've talked about this morning. The wilderness in which God teaches us to trust Him because He knows all about our problems. And I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way. You think, God doesn't know about my problems. He's not doing anything about them. Well, I want to assure you He has a plan. I know sometimes He doesn't solve your problems the way you want or when you want Him to, but He has a perfect plan and perfect timing. There are things God sees in your heart that you don't even know are there. There are things God sees in the hearts of people around you that you don't know are there. I mean, how often, I wonder, I don't even know for sure, how often I've seen Christians suffer for the sake of somebody close to them that needed Christ or needed to see them get through that suffering in order to be strengthened in their faith for something they were about to face. I mean, many of you ladies in here talk about your cancer situation, and you've been there for each other. You were there for her. You know, I mean, and for her. I mean, the people that have been through that are the ones who encourage you to get somebody else, encourage the next person to get through it. And see that not as a curse, but as a gift from God that allows you to now minister. God, grow our faith so that we all see it that way. So that we see the trials in our lives as God growing us so that we are stronger, so that we are more equipped, so that we can trust Him and teach others to trust Him as we have learned to do. The evidence is clear. We have to lay aside our feelings, our bitterness, and our pride and come to see that He can be trusted, not with parts of our lives, but with our whole life. everything. He knows the deepest needs of our hearts. And by satisfying those, listen, the surface needs we tend to focus on can fade to the background, becoming less important. Because we become spirit-minded people, focused on spiritual issues in our lives, and trusting God to take care of those physical things. Seeking first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, trusting Him to add all these things on us. I don't need to worry about the surface needs. I just need to worry about my relationship with God. Not worry about it, but focus on it. Stay in tune with Him. Let Him have the opportunity to grow me by coming before Him. So as you wander through this life of the wilderness faith, take the time to learn to trust Him by looking at the evidence in His Word, in His Son, and in the world around you, and in the Christians around you who are making that evident. It's there. We just got to pray for eyes to see it and hearts to be strengthened to believe. Let's pray together. Father, I thank You that we can trust You. There is nothing about Your character that proves we cannot trust You. God, even when You discipline us, You prove that we can trust You because You don't leave us alone when we mess up. You care for us and love us enough to correct us. We thank You for that. Even when we go through hard times, Lord, we trust that You have a purpose in that. And God, it's hard when we're going through it in the moment. You understand that too. You understand that when we're thirsty and the water is bitter, that it's hard to trust. But by Your grace, You patiently teach us and prove Yourself over and over and over. So God, give us eyes to see. Give us hearts that are softened to receive and accept just how good You are, even when it doesn't look like it to our eyes. And help us to realize that everything You do or allow in our lives in some way is meant to come around full circle to bring You glory. So Lord, give us hearts to now respond to You, not just in this moment, but throughout this week. Hearts that are willing to put ourselves before You and say, teach me, Lord. That is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.